The previous basket is under review.
Hello, and welcome to the Basket Under Review podcast. I am your host, Eamonn Brennan of Buzzer at eamonnbrennan.com. That's my newsletter. Go check it out, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Also of Basket Under Review, the home of this podcast. It's a brand new site sprouted from Trilly Donovan's Discord that has, thousands of paid subscribers there for his breaking news in the community. They also now, with their subscription, get access to some of the best and most in-depth college basketball coverage you'll find anywhere. I encourage everyone to go check out the site. I think the cadence and quality of the work that everyone's been putting out there has been really special, considering the site is new and launched in the dead of the off season. And I'm really excited to see where things go as we get a little bit closer to actual basketball being back. Thank God basketball's coming back soon. Also check out our sponsor, Homefield, homefieldapparel.com. I'm wearing a Homefield shirt right now. Didn't even mean to do that. It's just in the rotation. Homefield is the best place in the world to get college athletics apparel, classic retro vintage types of stuff, modern, comfortable, great sort of quality and high level stuff. Definitely better than the stuff I used to buy when I was in college from, well, I'm not going to name the store. That would be rude, but let's just say Homefield has elevated the college athletics apparel game to a very high level. So very proud to have them sponsoring the show. Thank you to Homefield for supporting us. Okay, CJ, we're in the show. How you doing, man? It's good to see you.
Good to see you, man. Thanks for having me.
For sure. Very excited to talk to you. Our guest today is CJ Moore of The Athletic. He is a friend, colleague, former colleague, I guess still colleague. I think in college basketball writing, or really kind of any sports writing, any beat people cover, you tend to specialize, right? Like some people maybe break a ton of news, but they're not going to go write you a 3,000 word story about a kid's, journey to Texas Tech or whatever. And the person who might be able to write you that story and win an award and tug at your heartstrings might not be interested in advanced stats or synergy film or whatever. And I think CJ has always done all of it and done it at a really high level. And I've tried to do that in my work as well. And so it's always been fun to talk to him about hoops and pick his brain. We used to do some Twitter Spaces like stuff on The Athletic. I don't know if you guys still do that, but that was always fun. So it's great to chat to you and talk to you about what's been going on. But we're gonna dig into Kansas because obviously you've covered that program pretty closely. You wrote a book about Kansas, so it feels appropriate to dive into what is a very interesting offseason for the Kansas Jayhawks men's basketball team. But first, I kind of wanted to pick your brain a little bit about just sort of an offseason catch-up kind of deal, right? Like I think we're now getting into preseason, sort of. We're a couple months away from the start of the year. I'm excited about that because the dead of the offseason and late July, August is just really bums me out sometimes. I feel like there's nothing to write about anymore. But what would you say the biggest story of the offseason was? I think for me it was tournament expansion, but I'm curious, as you've been talking to coaches throughout the spring and into the summer, going to AAU events and stuff, what is the biggest thing that maybe you'll remember this offseason for?
Tournament expansion has definitely been a topic of conversation, and I think I think you're right. It's probably been the biggest sport for like people that aren't into the nitty gritty details of the day to day in college basketball. To me, I think the most fascinating thing about this season, and the thing I'm most interested to see how it plays out, is the number of international kids that are coming over and are going to play this season. I've written about it some. How good are they going to be? What kind of impact are they going to have? We've never had this many high level guys from overseas come over, and there are some coaches who think some of them are going to have really big impacts. There's some coaches that are super skeptical of whether these kids are whether people are overpaying for them. I think in some ways they were cheaper than some of the transfers. So that was like Illinois, for instance, is all in on going international route instead of like trying to get a bunch of transfers. So to me, like that's what I'm most fascinated about this off season and coming into the season.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, I think, when you look at like pro sports, there's changes from year to year, but they're mostly in a tactical sense. It's like little tweaks. People change how they want to construct their roster. Mm-hmm. They change how they want to spend their salary cap. It feels like college basketball for the last 5-6 years now. It's like a wholesale change every offseason, whether it is conference realignment, and all of a sudden we've got like these massive conferences to the point where I forget that the Pac-12 no longer exists at various.
But yet it
moments.
does.
And yet it sort of does. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And then you go to the next season and okay, the NIL is this, and it feels like coaches have finally everybody's raised a bunch of money, and you kind of have a level for what level you need to be playing at in NIL to build the roster that you want to build in the offseason. But now we have revenue sharing, and no one knows what the revenue sharing situation is gonna change NIL or how it's really gonna work. So it has been fascinating. I think for me, it has been tournament expansion because it did animate such a large group of people outside this, sort of like you said, the nitty gritty fanatics who are dialed into like the 80th best roster in the country in the middle of June or whatever. You have, that's the kind of thing that gets on like PTI and Around the Horn and stuff like that, right? Although I don't know if Around the Horn still exists anymore, but those kinds of shows, First Take, let's say. And you actually wrote one of the few columns, I think, and this is a topic I talked to our very first guest on this podcast about, Ken Pomeroy, right around the time all this was happening. You wrote a column kind of tentatively in favor of expansion. And I think you're one of the few people who did. And I think you came at it from the angle, sort of like with Ken, where, expansion wouldn't necessarily be the worst thing. It has its benefits as well as its maybe some disadvantages, that kind of stuff. But the real piece that I think Ken tried to dial in on during our conversation, and that you eventually concluded with in your piece too, is that the real change to the tournament, whether it's 68 teams, 76, 90, however many it ends up being in the next 10 years, is how the teams are evaluated. And, switching from the committee approach, which is very human oriented, obviously relies a lot on metrics, but there's a conversation that happens and people look at the metrics and then they say, but I don't think that team's actually that good. And then they decide based on that, right? Like, oh, Tucker DeVries was hurt, so we don't think that team should be in the tournament, right? Yeah. Versus a sort of strength of record, WOB, combination of metrics that you just, hey, these are the top 68 teams, these are the top 80 teams, these are the top at-large candidates, and you rank and seed from there. I like this idea in theory, right? I think on the merits, it's a really good idea. Like it just makes a lot of sense in terms of you want to get the best teams in the tournament. We have a lot of ways to figure out who the best teams are in a very diffuse sport where everybody doesn't play everybody. But looking at the expansion conversation and how angry that made people who follow the sport religiously, but also don't, and just want the tournament to be the tournament when they show up in March, I think your column kind of saying, hey, we should do this with WOB. Again, good on the merits, but my biggest question with this is how do you sell this to people? How do you make the how does the NCAA, which can't even sell tournament expansion, it does not have someone coming out and making a coherent argument for tournament expansion, and just kind of gets drowned under the deluge of angry comments. How do you sell to fans who already don't like the net, who complain to me when I'm writing Bubble Watch every year? Who cares about the net? The net's garbage. It goes up 10 points when we lose by 2. It goes up 2 when we win by 30 or whatever the complaint of the day is. How do you sell a totally metrics-based approach to people who I think maybe aren't locked in on college basketball and kind of don't really want to have to understand what the metrics mean for their teams?
I think you sell it as you already get really mad at the humans who pick this. Like, let's take out human error and let's make it, everybody knows the rules. Everybody knows how that's going to get picked. You can schedule based on that. Ken's big point. And like, I think what angers a lot of people is when like a Indiana State gets left out. Yeah. This past year, UC San Diego, if they hadn't won their conference tournament, probably gets left out, which is I wrote about them during the year, like super fun team that it would have sucked to not have them in the NCAA tournament, right? And with wins above bubble, it makes it so that they can actually get into the tournament because it's really hard for them to schedule, quad 1 games in the non-conference because nobody will play them. Right. And so I think it's the fairest way of doing it would be Ken's argument, and I'm right there with him. And he made the point, and I firmly agree with him that like he doesn't feel as strongly about I don't want to speak to him, but he's basically said this to me. He doesn't feel strongly about expanding the tournament,
Right.
as those who don't want to expand it feel strongly about that. And I'm kind of the same way. Like, I don't care that much one way or the other. I think the tournament's still going to be awesome no matter what it looks like. You're still going to get that 64 that starts on Thursday,
Right.
most likely in any scenario. But let's use this conversation in another way of being like, well, what can we do better? And what they could do better is how they pick the field. And like, really, like, why do we have a selection committee? Most likely it's just to make people feel important, right? Like here's a way to save money, probably, because we don't have to fly all these people in. We don't have to meet like
a week of hotel rooms at the JW Marriott for
Yeah.
30 people or whatever.
Yeah, think about how expensive that is. Like, we don't need all that shit. Let's just can we curse on this podcast? Is that good?
It's okay. Yeah, you're allowed. Yeah, you're allowed.
We don't need all that. Let's just pick the field, and we know how we're going to pick the field every single year, and we don't bring into account of, oh, well, that guy's he's looking out for his school, or he's looking out for his conference, yada yada yada. Like, I think that's just the fairest way to do it, and probably in the end might make the least amount of people angry. Who knows?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I think that's a bad way for me to look at it, but I feel like maybe it's because I'm in the bubble watch trenches, in February, March, and I get these comments all the time because you're trying to evaluate the teams the way you think the committee would based on what they've done in the past, and it's a guessing game, and you just kind of, most of the time until we get to the last couple of weeks of bubble watch, it's just kind of a structure, a skeleton to write about all these college basketball teams anyway. I'm not really dialing into, like, in mid-January what a team needs to do in their last 15 conference games or whatever to get in the tournament. But I guess, yeah, the public anger thing is something that it seems like it probably affected the tournament expansion conversation this year when people were meeting in I believe it was South Carolina or maybe Georgia, Savannah, Georgia, and was maybe a contributing factor to why they kind of punted it, because they saw, as the people are sort of sitting in the room together talking, everyone's looking at their phones being like, these guys really hate this idea. You guys just putting this out there, like, we can talk about it, but everyone outside this room absolutely hates this idea. And so maybe that's something that just needs to not be a part of the process, and you just have to trust your decisions and not sort of govern by poll. But it is, I do think it informs the conversation about this stuff. And I do think, trying to, since the net came in favor of RPI, I was like, oh my God, this is great. Like, this is an actual, like, instead of trying to do this arcane old, 50-year-old statistic, we can talk about something that has to do with performance and efficiency and, strength of, like, your opponents and how bad you beat them by, and the way that we rank teams with every other system when we're just evaluating them. Is this team good or not? But there's been sort of a big pushback against net as the years have gone along, and there's the conversation every year about which conference, and we'll talk about one of the conferences that gets accused of this today in a lot of detail. We're going to talk about the Big 12 and kind of preview the Big 12, but I think you've had a lot of, like, ACC fans and Big East fans, I think, in the past, kind of saying, well, look at the Big 12. They beat such and such team. Iowa State beat such and such team by 55 in November, and that's why their net refuses to sink past 10 all season. And there's just a lot of, it feels like you have to do a lot of education, at least in my position. And maybe the NCAA just needs to say, screw it. Like, we're doing what we're doing, and you're going to either like it or you don't have to watch. And that's what it is. But it's weird in that I think the trend of college sports and conference realignment, like, no fans really want conference realignment, but it happens anyway. And so the NCAA may be being sensitive to criticism from the centralized body standpoint is kind of funny, because that's not been the trend in college athletics, is, like, listening to the fans and thinking about what they care about. But I do think that people at the NCAA do care, and they don't want every decision they make to have a massive blowback. But it is going to be interesting to see how the conversation evolves over time, because I think you're right. The expansion conversation, I'm not gung-ho against. I think I used to be. I've been a little bit swayed by Ken and others over the years. My big thing when I was talking to Ken was just that there weren't too many good proactive arguments for it. That most of the arguments were, it'll be fine. You'll like it anyway. But I think that you're right. The big conversation is selection and seeding, and I think there at some point you do have to try to do some education for the public, so that's not just Eamonn getting yelled at when he's doing bubble watch in a different way, because now we're ranking teams based on their statistics. And frankly, I don't like getting yelled at either.
Anytime there's rankings involved, people are going to yell and scream and get angry. Like it's the thing I least like doing is ranking teams, just because I like writing about how the teams are interesting. I don't really care how they rank.
Right.
Like they're going to figure it out in the end, right? But man, it gets people worked up.
They do not like it, and they do not like if their team wins and another team loses, and you rank that team above their team that week in your top 25 or whatever the case may be. Yeah. People don't like it. So I don't know. Maybe we just need to, or the NCAA anyway. We listen to the fans. We listen to your feedback. Leave us a review on iTunes. We'll take it all on board. But maybe the NCAA just needs to do what they want to do and move forward from there. Okay. Well, that's the tournament expansion conversation. It'll roll on. We didn't really get a resolution. They kind of kicked it down the road this year, but we have a lot of other interesting things to talk about. I want to talk to you about Kansas, as I mentioned at the top. A very, very, very interesting offseason. I touched a little bit on it in last week's podcast with Brian Ralph. But as I mentioned, you wrote a book about Kansas. You've covered Bill Self extremely closely. You are the type of reporter who will go to practices and check out Kansas in the middle of the summer and come back with what you see. So I'll just leave this open-ended to start. What strikes you about Kansas this offseason, and we can go from there?
I think that Bill has been...
Words are being chosen carefully here. I could see the gears turning.
Yeah. I think he's been reflective in how he's built it the last couple of years, and they almost just needed to the end of the road needed to come for Hunter Dickinson and DeJuan Harris, and I will defend KJ Adams for forever for people who thought he was an issue, because I love that guy, but the end of the road almost needed to come for that group, and they needed kind of a reset, and because there was I don't know if obsession's the right word, or a desire to make sure it fit around Hunter the last couple of years, right? And
right.
let's build an optimal offense that includes Hunter Dickinson. And now that he was gone, it's kind of like they could take a fresh look and be like, okay, why did this not really work? And while their defensive numbers were really good last year, it didn't feel like they were dominant defense. And I think there were weak links in their defense the last couple of years. And so, Bill Self does not like that. He likes teams that guard. He likes teams that can really get after you and dictate the terms. And so he built this team in a way of, okay, I'm going to have guys that we don't have weak links defensively, or they're very minimal. And we can be more aggressive on the defensive end, and we can have guys that off the dribble can get by you and get into the paint. Because last year, I think their assist rate was probably one of the highest in the country, and that wasn't necessarily a desired outcome. It was by necessity, because they didn't have guys that could really get by you off the bounce. They had to throw it into Hunter and play through him. So while Self has always loved to play through the post, I think it was more of building it towards, okay, let's not worry about that as much, and let's be able to defend and get, attack the paint and be able to play a little faster. And hey, we got this guy, Darren Peterson, who's freaking awesome. Let's make sure we get a little shooting around him, but more lean towards athleticism instead of just okay, we got to go to get a bunch of shooters. And then in the end, he felt like this spring he needed one more legit scorer, right? And they kind of struck out on Darian Williams and Dame Sarr, who were the big two targets, big two names. And in the end, I'm not sure if it didn't work out to their advantage because it allowed them to go get Cole Rosario, who I think is going to be a really, really good fit playing next to Darren and is a really good shooter and kind of a perfect Bill Self, simple, knows what he is, knows what his strengths are type of player. Maybe we'll look back and be like, oh, they could have used one more like really good scorer, but it's an interesting build. It's an interesting team. It was going to get guys in the portal that maybe weren't the biggest names, the highest on the list, but he kind of felt maybe fit them a little bit better. So I'm interested to see how it plays out.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing because the Hunter Dickinson transfer, his silly announcement video aside, was a big deal. It felt like sort of the culmination of the transfer portal, right? You've got this guy who's had really amazing start to his career at Michigan. Now he's going to Kansas. Kansas is playing on a NIL level similar to their sort of recruiting of freshmen down the years. Being able to go out and get one of the best players in the country basically on a yearly basis. And then it obviously didn't work out for a variety of reasons. I do wonder how much Bill has looked back and reflected just on, you have DeJuan Harris, you have KJ Adams, these are program guys, right? And then you throw Dickinson in the mix, and those are going to be your three, kind of whether you like it or not. You're not going to take those guys off the floor a ton. And so I wonder if he considers that original roster construction to be the core of the problem, or if he just thinks he missed on guys in the portal that would have complemented it better, because they obviously AJ Storr didn't pan out. I think Rylan Griffin was okay, right? He's fine. He gave them some shooting that they desperately needed, but other than that, didn't have a huge impact. And Zeke Mayo was pretty good, I think, in giving them some guard play and some perimeter stuff. But I just wonder how you go back and build, even if what guys do you go out and get that still in 2025 or 2024 make it so that a team with three non-shooters essentially on the floor is going to work in the way that you want it to. And he's never been a big 3-point guy. If you go down and look at his rosters, or there's kind of a similar look analytically to Roy Williams, where you think of Roy Williams' teams getting up and down, and you actually look at their splits in terms of field goal attempts, and was never a big 3-point enthusiast. And Bill's never been that way either. But I do wonder if there's a sort of a reconsideration of what you have to be an effective offensive team in this era, because I think college basketball tactically and strategically has changed significantly even in the past 2-3 years.
Yeah. And what he has always been is an easy basket guy.
Yeah.
He likes layups, whatever way you get them. And it made it hard to get layups when the floor was
when the guys are playing 10 feet off DeJuan Harris going under every screen, there's not a whole lot. How are you going to get to the rim? And
when you didn't have guys with the foot speed to create advantages, domino basketball, because all they could do really to create those was throw it in the post, hope there was a double team, and then play out of that. Ironically, you look back on it, and one of the game they probably looked the best last year was against Houston. And I haven't really thought about this, but why do you think?
Probably because Houston's pressuring them out to 30 feet regardless of who you're playing.
Houston would double team the post.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, they crash every post touch.
Yeah. So that created two on the ball, and then they played out of that, and they were a pretty good passing team.
Yeah.
And there were a handful of games the last couple of years where the ball really moved and it was beautiful to watch and it worked out. But when people sagged off and they didn't guard certain people, and it made it really hard to run offense. So I still think, do they have enough shooting on this team? That's probably the question. That's probably what eats at him at night. Do we have enough shooting on this team? But it's an improvement, and at least they have guys that can I think they're going to play pretty fast for Self. And they're going to try to just relentlessly attack the paint off the bounce as much with movement and ball movement and dribble drives as much as they can. They'll still throw it in a little bit and try to get some of the angled posts that they always do. But Flory's not a guy you can just like throw it to with his back to the basket and have a guy between him and the basket and hope he can, just beat his guy one-on-one.
Operate, right. You want him running at the rim and grabbing offensive rebounds and doing that kind of stuff. I mean, obviously, in addition to this, and I think, coming off are these the two worst years he's had at Kansas, just in terms of like NCAA tournament seed and probably personal frustration? I mean, in either various time. I think 2 years ago, he was talking about, he was already thinking about building his roster in March. And, last year he had, can't even remember what time of year it was, but he had a press conference where he was just like, everybody just needs a break from each other. Like, we just don't like each other very much right now. So, you throw that in, coming off these 2 years, you throw in his health issues that he's had that you've talked to him about and written about. It sounded like there was a moment at least once or twice this summer where he was thinking about his health and thinking about his longevity and the future of his career and how much longer he wants to keep doing this. Sounds like he's back and all in now, but do you sense this as a particularly pivotal year for him, sort of in the long run of his career and his career trajectory? Houston has dominated the Big 12 in the past 2 years. His teams have not been very good, and now he's got to kind of reinvest himself and rebuild this team. Obviously, Peterson is a big trump card to pull out. But do you sense that he's kind of at a personally pivotal moment as well?
Just in that, like, he is so uber competitive that, like, I think last year was almost like you thought, okay, here's the redemptive year for Self, and it didn't play out. So, like, man, here's the just kind of doubling down on that. Like, it's 3 straight years of not being at the level that he's used to being at would, I think, really trouble him. And so he's a pretty motivated, pretty competitive guy. So just in that way, like, I don't know that the health stuff as much as just like it not sitting right with him, how the last couple of years have gone, that like he's going to be pretty fired up to try to get this right.
Yeah, it's felt weird too watching them, just because, for as long as I've been writing about college basketball, he has been dominating the Big 12 more or less every year. And occasionally Baylor would pop up and steal a conference title away, or tie for one. But you could pencil it in, or you could write it in Sharpie, to use our friend Seth's phrase. Every single November, Kansas is going to win the Big 12, and then Houston jumps in the conference, and there's
now you're putting them in the Sharpie.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, there's no adaptation for Houston. There's no, we were in the American, and this, the Big 12 is so tough. And I know Sampson talked it up in his first press conference, like his first Big 12 media day. He had that great quote about being in the dog park, and in his previous conference, there was like a Shih Tzu, and you could beat up this dog and this dog, but there was none of that in the Big 12. And of course, he comes in and they win they go 16-2 or whatever, and win the league straight away. And obviously, we're a bucket away from the national title last year. It's just been a weird little mini era for him that I think makes this coming season particularly fascinating, especially because he's rebuilding. There aren't a lot of program guys here now. There isn't a DeJuan Harris. There isn't a KJ Adams. And for whatever issues those guys had on the offensive end, Self has always won with guys like that or equivalent that have been in the program a long time. You pepper in the really talented, your Andrew Wiggins is along the way here and there. But the core of his teams have always been 3-4 year guys. And this is a really interesting departure, and just going to be a fascinating season to play out. Yeah.
I think the one thing that might help them is watching Darren Peterson. He operates like a guy who has been in college for 3 or 4 years. How
good is this guy for real? Have you, like, I haven't seen a ton of him other than just, clips, right? Like, I haven't seen him out at AAU events. Can you please talk, because everyone, obviously the consensus is he's going to be one of the best players in the country. Is he like 90% Cooper Flag level good player in the country, where he just takes your team to a completely new level?
I hate going too crazy, but yeah, I think he's pretty, like, the way he sees it, the way his vision for the floor and his feel, and like when to attack, when to make the pass. pick and roll reads, really, really high level, can score it. Like, he's not like an insane, like quick twitch guy. Like but he's pretty darn athletic. It's legit, like 6'5", can shoot it. Like he can do all the things that you want out of a guard, and he's 6'5". Like, there's a reason he is rated as high as he is. I didn't see him before he got to Kansas live ever. So I don't know like what the progression has been like, but man, he's pretty good, and I can kind of understand like how seeing him live, how he is maybe past AJ DeBonsa and Boozer, because like I think DeBonsa's kind of been the same guy for the last couple of years, and like the last part of his game is like, can he hit the 3-ball consistently? And he hasn't really shown that. Like, he's a pretty good mid-range scorer. But this kid can score at all 3 levels and makes other people better. That's probably what's most promising for Kansas, is that like he's not only a really good scorer, but he should make Flory way better. He should make he should make a Cole Rosario way better, because he's going to get him good shots. Dawson, he should make him better because he's going to get him shots. So I think that's where Kansas fans should be really excited, that just like, not only do you have a really good individual ISO, guy that can go get his own, but he's going to make everybody else better. So yeah, I think he's really good.
Yeah. It is an exciting prospect too, after 2 years of, effectiveness aside, Kansas just wasn't very much fun to watch the last couple of years. They just were not. They're not a team that you're like, oh, Kansas is on. This is going to be a fun, this is going to be a fun 2 hours of my life. No, it might be 2 hours of your life you're never going to get back by the time you're done. That you're kind of like, another rock fight. But it is fun that there isn't, with all due respect to him, that there isn't, okay, dump it down to Hunter and then we play from there. And Hunter will either score and then he'll sort of jog back up the court. And the idea of playing through this super talented wing who can do a bunch of different stuff at different levels, and maybe putting the
really
ball in
point
his hands.
guard.
Yeah, I mean he's going to have the ball in his hands.
He'll be the point guard.
Yeah. The idea of him having the ball in his hands a ton and playing outside in and getting at the rim and doing stuff sounds at least more entertaining. So I'm looking forward to that. All right, fascinating season for Kansas. Wanted to get CJ's temperature because, like I said, he has covered that program in an insane amount of depth over the years. So yeah, we'll keep an eye on Kansas all year, because like I think it's a particularly pivotal year. But I also want to talk to you and kind of, we haven't really started doing this on the podcast yet, but this is a good place to start. Just kind of go through the Big 12, do a little preview, give us some vibes on what you're thinking about some of these teams. I think it's a really kind of interesting year. I mean, we've talked a lot on the show already about Houston. Houston's going to be good. Spoiler alert, Houston's going to be really, really good at basketball. And if people didn't know that, well, now you do. BYU, we've talked about a fair amount. Iowa State covered in pretty good detail last year with Brian Ralph. So people last week, pardon me, with Brian Ralph, and Arizona to some extent too. So we can kind of edge past the top of the league here and get into some of these other teams, including, I mean, first, I want to talk to you about Texas Tech, which is not a team that I've touched on a ton in the show so far. Interesting sort of give and take with the roster situation in terms of, retaining key guys, losing Darian Williams, who I always thought was good last year, but that during the NCAA tournament was just like, this guy's such a stud. Like, oh my goodness, Florida had really no answer for him. And that's saying a lot, because Florida basically had an answer for everybody all year last year. So what do you make of Grant McCaslin's latest Tech team? Because I think if you polled coaches around the country, they would put him on a list of his name would come up a lot if you're talking about sort of the best young-ish coaches in college basketball right now.
Yeah, I think they have a really clear idea of who they want to be and how they want to build it. And I think it's helped him bringing in Jeff Linder, former Wyoming coach, who ran his offense last year. They were, I mean, if you go back and watch them, they were pretty simple. Like, there wasn't a lot of passing. It was getting to a certain action, getting to a certain guy. A
lot of side stuff for Williams in the tournament, which was just
just you put him in a Barkley and stop this.
Yeah,
here's
good
space.
luck with this. Yeah,
yeah, here's space. Like, stop this. And so, like, losing that, you wonder how that'll go, because he was such a weapon for them, and he was really, really good when you gave him space and just he could bully people. I think they tried to go out and get a guy, that can be similar in Lawan Watts. And they're talking to Grant, like he's pretty excited about him and like thinks he can be really, really good. So we'll see if like he can live up, if he can be 90% of what Williams was, I think then they're going to be really, really good. Because I think one of the freshmen that impressed me the most last season of just about anybody in college basketball was Christian Anderson. Because you had heard coming into the year that like he could be pretty good, but he wasn't a guy that was like high up on any lists, and he just had a presence to him that was pretty impressive. Just like kind of what we're talking about, Peterson just like felt older when you watched him play, right?
Feel and IQ and stuff like that.
And then he was awesome for Germany this summer in the U19s. I think he's ready to make a like stardom step.
Mm-hmm. His numbers profile out. I mean, if you look at his efficiency numbers from last year, his shooting numbers, he fits like low turnover rate. He fits the profile of give this guy more usage rate and he's still going to be good. Like, just historically, if you were building a model, you'd plug his numbers in and the model would say good player, going to be really good as a sophomore.
Yep. So he'll be awesome. Probably better to have ball in his hands even more. And then, obviously getting JT Toppin back, huge bonus, huge plus. So I think they're going to play through those three players a lot. And then they went and got spacers that can space it. They went and got a elite rim protector to either, maybe they'll start him, maybe they'll bring him off the bench, who knows, but he'll probably, play 20-ish, 25 minutes a game, something like that. They're thin. They don't have a lot of depth. That would probably be like the biggest concern for them, but they know who they are. Like they're going to go in the portal. They're going to go get a bunch, several guys that can really, really shoot it and give their best isolation scorers, best pick and roll players space to operate. And they're going to put them in advantageous situations and say, hey, stop it. And most times you're probably not going to stop it. And if you try to put two on the ball, they're just going to spray it out. They're going to shoot a bunch of threes.
Yeah. And for me, depth in college basketball can be a little overrated. It's really an injury.
Yeah.
It's really an injury thing, right? Like, I mean, I think most coaches, if you could guarantee everybody's going to be healthy all year, they'd roster 7 guys. You know what I mean? Like they can keep everybody happy. The rotation's tight. Everybody knows how to play with each other. You're not running, you're down to your 10th or 11th guy. It's a purely an injury thing. And you just have to hope guys stay healthy. Okay. So next on my list is Baylor. I'm very interested to see, I have not talked about Baylor at all this offseason, and at least on the podcast. And it feels like this is my dog's barking in the background. Hopefully that doesn't show up on the show, but if it does, hey, that's my dog, everyone. The Baylor is in such a sort of fascinating moment in Scott's Drew career, because you don't want to say this about coaches, particularly ones with his record, but it doesn't feel like they've gotten back to that peak that he was at. Obviously they won the national title, but that program was at that level or thereabouts for a number of years. Going toe-to-toe with Kansas in the Big 12 for the better part of a decade, really, and hasn't quite hit that level. And so what do you make of where Baylor is as a program, and then, sort of what this team is going to look like when we see it on the floor?
What a fascinating time in college basketball. I mean, that's one more for who knows. Where a program like Baylor that won a national championship just a few years ago lost every single person off their roster
and got outbid for like
all
by BYU.
They for sure wanted to keep one guy.
Yeah.
And they had him. Apparently, like, he was supposed to come back, and then here's a bag. Sorry, you're gone.
Here's a gigantic suitcase of
an offer you cannot refuse. Yeah. So that was kind of a crazy spring storyline that happened. But yeah,
I love in college basketball we can just talk about this openly now, by the way, instead of like you have to whisper about it if you can't prove it and like say anything publicly about it. You just know now, like, oh yeah, he left because he got a bunch more money. Yeah, like, we don't have to pretend anymore.
Yeah. So I mean, we'll see how it goes. They went out and got an entire new team. I think it's really, really difficult to try to bring in a whole new roster. Excuse me. He has had success with the one and done kids, identifying those guys, getting them in, them having pretty good years, and then moving on. They have continued to be able to score pretty efficient level year in and year out. If you look at their numbers since the national championship team, like their offenses have been good. That year after, they were really good. I mean, they were still at that level, right?
Yes.
That next year, they could that team goes perfectly. Might have been good enough to win the title again, right? Like you remember, they lost to North Carolina in like an insane game.
Oh yeah, that was the Carolina run. Yeah, they were.
Yeah, Carolina ends up going to the title game, and like Baylor easily could have won that game. So, I think they were at the level that year, but then since they haven't guarded, like their defense has dramatically fallen off. They haven't been able to stop anybody, and I think when you look at this team, like it's last year they went in and they got 3 super expensive players and like tried to, we've got it was almost like a Heat build, right? Like when the Heat had LeBron and Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh, like, let's go get 3 really expensive guys and let's just kind of piece it around them. And
Mario Chalmers is our 4th best player.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And that didn't exactly work. Jeremy Roach not hitting on all 3 of those guys was probably hurt. Like Roach didn't play to what you thought he would probably be, or what they thought he was going to be.
Omier was better than he was his last year in Miami. I'll give him credit. He defensively, you go back and look at. I've talked about this in the past. You go back and look at that Miami team, the last one he was on, and you've talk about a team that just quit like midway through the season, just flat out quit. Yeah. And obviously, I think the change of scenery was important for him, and he wasn't bad defensively, but they were not a good defensive team last year, particularly relative to the best half of the Big 12, where it's just like, a gauntlet defensively. They just weren't there. Yeah.
So this time around, they go get another really, really good freshman who I think is maybe better than initially thought, just based off talking to scouts this summer. It's Tonde Yesufu, I think is how you say it, but I could be.
Don't ask me. Last week I pronounced Thomas Huff, because I forgot it. It's the hard G, which is embarrassing as both a podcaster and an Irishman. So.
Yeah, so I'm special when it comes to that stuff. But talking to scouts, I know he's been like pretty darn good this summer. But outside of that, like I think it's a shift to, and I'm interested. I'm going there next month, or actually this month, and interested to talk to Scott and their people about this. But I think they went from spending a lot on 3 players to like kind of spreading it out, and let's try to have a little bit of depth and. Maybe guys that aren't as high profile, and maybe you can get those guys to really buy into defense. I don't know. I don't know what their thinking is on like how they built the roster and what the kind of, the type of players they wanted to get. But, there's some guys that have done some stuff at the college level. There's some guys that have done stuff at mid-major level. They're not names that you necessarily, the average college basketball person knows.
Yeah.
But, I mean, there's some talent there. I just put together my Big 12 preview. I don't know when it'll run, but I just went ahead. It was like it's late August or September. Let's knock this out.
What else are you gonna do?
Yeah. And I've got them 7th. I think there's a clear top 6, and then them and K-State is kind of on a tier by themselves. Another team that basically build it from nothing as well, and has some talent. They have a little bit more recognizable names. I just gave Baylor the edge because, hey, Scott Drew has pretty consistently, even in these kind of down years, they're still up there making the NCAA tournament. So,
sure.
It's a fascinating year for them because it's all new.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's pivot to Kansas State. That was gonna be my next one because, you know, obviously Jerome Tang, former Baylor assistant. I think their defensive decline in the last few years kind of tracks pretty closely with when Tang left and took the job at Kansas State. You know, I think they have missed him and whatever defensive acumen he brought to the program, which maybe hasn't always translated at Kansas State as well. But he has certainly recruited well, and they've had moments, particularly in his first year. But the last couple of years have been a bit of a struggle. So where are you on this team? The transfers, obviously Haggerty is a huge deal. But where are you on Kansas State and kind of where Tang is at in his tenure? Because I think, you know, you try not to do this. You try not to be a sports writer via Twitter or Blue Sky or whatever social media you're on. But it is sometimes helpful to get a feel. And it did feel like the internet of K-State fans kind of maybe turned on him a little bit. Yeah, turned on him a little bit towards the end of last year, maybe in the middle of it. Where are you?
Yeah, I think it's an important year for him because it's a program that is spent. And
that is for sure.
We're in an era where like you get so many years to really spend, and if it doesn't come through, you know, and you go back to those people, are they going to continue to want to spend? Well, maybe if you change coaches, like that's kind of the point we're at. So I don't know if K-State's quite there yet with Jerome Tang, but I do think this is an important year because it's another, on paper, it appears to be another expensive roster. You know, went out and got PJ Haggerty. They've got a couple international guys that I don't think were cheap. So it's a fascinating roster. You know, Nate Johnson was like a really good player at Akron, which was, I think, you know, I'm guessing you agree with me. That was probably one of the best mid-major programs this last year, right? Like I thought they were legit good.
Yeah.
They got two, you know, highly thought of international guys, Andrzej Kostic. Hopefully I'm saying that right. I apologize.
I'll let you handle that.
Yeah. To anybody who, you know, is out there, and
it's probably Kostic. Soft C Kostic. Or the
maybe your guess is better than mine. He can really shoot. He put up pretty good numbers in the U19s. Elias Rapicu, yeah. Who knows?
Rapicu. Yeah,
Rapicu. He got real EuroLeague minutes. Like, you know, he was actually featured in my story that I wrote in the spring about all of the international players coming over, and you know, talked to the GM for his franchise, who was like, yeah, we're gonna lose this guy because we can't afford to keep him, even though like he's getting EuroLeague minutes. So you assume that will translate well. At the center spot, they don't have, you know, guys that are like have played high major basketball necessarily. Outside of the kid they returned, Moby, another name that I'm not going to be able to pronounce. But he played a little bit last year, but not a ton. So it's again like a fascinating roster that you know, they've got some mid-major guys that have done some things. Haggerty, I'm super fascinated to see like how Haggerty is going to translate, because his career, if you look back, he started at TCU, like didn't play. Didn't do anything. Transfers to Tulsa, crushes it there. Transfers to Memphis, crushes it there. So we've established he can be a All-American level, high-level scorer in the American. But now he's coming back to the Big 12. Like, will it translate? He is not like the modern-day analytical player in that he takes a lot of mid-ranges, a lot of shots off the dribble. I'm interested to see, like, can that be a winning All-American, All-Conference level player in the Big 12 or not? I'm guessing he puts up big numbers, but, like, is it winning numbers? We'll see.
Right. And that was the thing. That was the thing last year with Coleman Hawkins, was just you go out and it's how you spend your money. You know, Coleman Hawkins is a big name transfer. He's an expensive transfer. He is not a star of a team.
No,
he's
your third best player.
Yeah, and if he's your third best player, you got a really good team. And if he's off the ball, doing stuff, being active, moving, playing defense, switching, great player to have, but as the star of a program getting paid whatever it was he got paid last year, $2 million or something like that, that's not, it's just the thing of like, just because this guy costs a lot of money because a lot of coaches wanted him does not immediately you plug him in and you're automatically going to be good, right? And so that was sort of the original sin of that team last year, I think, and he had a disappointing year, and Kansas State had a disappointing year. So Haggerty, I think, is a guy that makes more sense as that big top piece, right? He's going to have the ball in his hands a lot. He's not off the ball and needing other people to create for him or needing the system to create for him necessarily. But it's still, he has to be really good for Kansas State to exceed their expectations. I think that, I think Bart's got them in the 60s right now in terms of his preseason rankings, and we'll see kind of what they grade out at when KenPom puts out his. But for them to get over that hump and get into some kind of similar level to where they were early in Tang's tenure, obviously it's not a particularly groundbreaking piece of analysis, but PJ Haggerty has to be really good in the Big 12, really good. Okay. Another interesting program at an interesting time in the coach's tenure, Cincinnati. Kind of go time now for I think for the first 2-3 years of his tenure, it was like, okay, Wes is building. He's bringing it along. It felt a little bit like a classic rebuild, even though, you have more guys leaving and coming and going in this era. Obviously, it just kind of can't be avoided. It did feel like he was sort of graduating up the line. And then you start last year, and I think early in the year they were ranked like in the top 10 in KenPom. They looked pretty good in the non-conference before they played anybody. And then things just, the wheels fell a bit off. They didn't, they weren't a disaster. But I think everyone was expecting a tournament bid at this stage, and it didn't happen. So lots of turnover, and obviously the Jizzle James situation is a blow. What do you make of Cincinnati thus far?
Yeah, it's upsetting we can't say Jizzle James as much because
I'm gonna miss him.
I could say that name. It's another interesting build. Like Baba Miller's one of those guys that like you're always in love with the idea of Baba Miller, but he's never actually won necessarily anywhere. There are times where you're like, wow, that guy's he can do that and that and that. But does that translate to winning? We'll see. They've got some interesting pieces. Like they've got the Jalen Haynes kid that was at George Mason, was their best player on a surprise best team in the A10 or A10 champ last year. They've got the Mustafa, is it Thame?
Diam, I believe.
Diam. It's Central Florida, who's like this 7'3" kid that can shoot threes, block shots. Another one of those guys that he's interesting. He shot more jumpers than I would have cared to see if I'm his coach.
Yes.
Him and Baba Miller, they're really talented. Do they translate to winning? We'll see. Is there enough shooting around them? Are they going to play really big? They do have some roster flexibility and lineup. He could throw out a bunch of different looking lineups out there. But yeah, do they have enough shooting? They went and got Sincere Harris, who was probably one of the best defenders in the portal, but he can't shoot. So
no, he cannot.
And Day Thomas isn't really a shooter. So, Kirk Kriisa,
which was a big problem with Cincinnati's team last year too.
It was
lack of offensive spacing due to a lack of shooting options.
But they did go get Kirk Kriisa. They went and got Jalen Celestine from Baylor, the old the kid that was at California that went to Baylor last year. Who he can shoot. They have a kid from Spain, Jordi Rodriguez, who I'm just gonna assume international kid. He can maybe shoot a little bit. Who knows though? I don't know. I don't know a ton about Jordy's game. So it seems like a roster that they spent a little bit on, and Cincinnati is a very proud program, and they expect to make some NCAA tournaments. So I think it's probably a big year for Wes, and it's an intriguing roster. I just don't know. I want to see it on the floor. There's so many of these Big 12 teams. I'll give you a crazy stat. I projected all the starting lineups for all the Big 12, and if you take out the top 6 So the bottom 10 teams in my rankings, and again, this is my projection, so I could be off on a handful of guys, but there were only 5 starters among those 10 teams that played on the team last year.
Wow. How many of them are on Houston?
No. This is the bottom 10.
Oh, the bottom 10. Oh, sorry.
The bottom
I missed
10.
That.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
And 2 of them were on Colorado. So, there's not a lot of – these teams are just going to be so new that, like, who knows how that bottom of that league plays out. And, probably one team is going to be way better than you'd expect. Like, maybe there will be you remember when Iowa State, TJ's first year, like, suddenly is good and they hadn't won a game the year before. And it wasn't like they had went and got huge names out of the portal. Maybe there will be a team like that this year in the Big 12 that we just kind of comes out of nowhere. Maybe it's like an Oklahoma State. Maybe it's.
I was just going to say, Oklahoma State is 47th in Bart's preseason rankings. That might be a candidate of year 2 under Lutz now, and a decent chance to kind of elevate. I think West Virginia, obviously starting over again. For
2 really good coaches.
Yeah. And I mean, West Virginia starting over now for what, the 4th time in 5 years, basically, because they lost Hugs suddenly, and had the interim situation. Obviously, they had DeVries, and now we're turning it over again. I think the bottom of the league is not, I don't think, going to be bad. Like if Colorado and Utah,
Central
Florida are your worst teams, you're in okay shape. They're not terrible, right?
Yeah,
like
we'll see.
Might be top
that's what hurt it last year was last year the Big 12's top. They had, remember, if you think back, they had 5 of the top 10 teams in the preseason.
Yeah, and
those teams didn't necessarily, obviously Houston lived up to that. Texas Tech ended up living up to or surpassing expectations, but some
Iowa
of those
State
teams
did for a while before the
but like Iowa State, Kansas, Baylor, they were a little disappointing, and that probably hurt them. That definitely hurt them in the metrics. But where the league wasn't as strong as it's been in the past is like the bottom was bad,
right?
And the bottom has been semi-competitive in other years, and now that you have the bottom went, or the league went from this size to this size, like that's just going to happen. So, but that the bottom 10 teams in that league, at least on paper, are going to be like fascinating to see who's actually good, who's sucks, who's just okay. Like it's a crapshoot.
Yeah. TCU will be chugging along, I think. No, yeah, that was.
I don't know. Like look at that roster.
Let's look at it. Let's just pull it up here.
So I got projecting to start Brock Harding. Like he's a good offensive point guard. He's tiny. He's probably part of the reason they were really bad defensively.
Not sure if I love Jaden Pierre.
Jaden Pierre,
like their number 2 contributor here.
Tanner Tolson, who was at Utah Valley, started at BYU. Like he put up okay numbers at Utah Valley. I've got him starting David Punch, who averaged 6.5 a game last year. At center, I'm not sure. They've got like an FIU kid. They've got an Oregon State guy that's I think like 6'7" Like it's just the roster. It might be the least talented team he's had.
Yeah.
So Pierre, it's like
I'm not. I don't want to be mean, but
yeah.
I don't know if Pierre is the guy you want to have as like a. Bart's got him projected for like 20% usage or something like that. I'm like, I don't know if that's where the road you want to be going down. His offensive rating last year was not pretty.
Yeah, do they have the juice? Like, do they have the juice to score enough? And like, Jamie's always going to have. You expect he's usually going to have pretty competitive teams, but it could be a year for them, kind of like it was for Colorado last year, where the talent just wasn't good enough. And like Colorado, since he's been there, has always been competitive until last year.
Yeah.
So, some of these programs, like it's an NIL issue where you've been good in another setting and all of a sudden you get to this environment where you maybe don't have the money to spend, and it doesn't matter how good a coach you are, that like if everybody else just has better players, then eventually it's a player's game. So
you really have to work some miracles. And Jamie Dixon has done that in the past. He's unearthed guys throughout his career.
For sure.
That you look at his rosters preseason, or you look at his recruiting classes, and you think, this might be a down year, and then Pitt would be a number 1 seed in the Big East, or TCU, would be a 3 seed in the tournament, something like that. But you may be right there. I want to shout out Utah really quickly, mostly because I want to encourage everybody to check out a piece Will Warren wrote earlier this summer called the Utah Rehearsal. It's on his Substack before he came over to Basket Under Review. And it's fascinating because he went through and looked at Utah's underlying numbers last year under Craig Smith, and they were fantastic. Their like shot volume, their the shot quality in synergy, they were among the top teams in the country, like right up there with Alabama. They didn't allow good looks. And you look at every team that compared on the underlyings similarly to them, and they were all like top 10, top 15 teams. And then you scroll down and it's Utah at like 82nd. And Will kind of dug into why that was. A lot of it had to do, I think, with free throw shooting, primarily the guys who got to the free throw line all the time for Utah and generated quality shots. Getting to the free throw is a high quality opportunity to score, just weren't good free throw shooters. And so they left a ton of points on the board basically every night. And, it's an interesting lesson, I think, as Will concluded, that, it's not like they were a perfect team and they just didn't make shots or something. There's flaws, and there's probably some flaws in the roster construction too. But you look at the actual coaching, and this is kind of what you just mentioned. The system was good. It's best practice stuff. It all makes sense, and it just didn't translate into wins. And now Craig Smith's gone. And I think Craig Smith is a of coach. I mean, I think he's always been a good coach. And I think he had some moments at Utah that proved that as well. And obviously things just kind of slid away last year. And so fascinating sort of starting over point. But I did want to shout out Will's piece, because I think it's the kind of thing that it is very easy to zoom out and just be like, oh yeah, Utah was kind of they were mid last year, coach got fired, time to start over. But the actual details of what they were doing were like pretty good, and it just didn't translate into points and wins.
And think about if they bring back Davion Smith last year, who was at St. John's. Some of those things you're talking about break a little differently. He's on your roster, and you're getting even better shots because he's super freaking fast, and he played with those guys the year before. Like, that's probably an NCAA tournament team.
Yeah.
And then so I mean, I think him losing his job mid-season felt pretty super unfair.
It was very harsh.
Yeah, but I think they knew what they wanted to do, and for some reason they wanted to start it early. But I'm going there next month too, and interested to see what that group looks like, and how they're going to be. That was a rough one for Craig, and hopefully Craig gets another job, and he should send a portion of his first paycheck probably to Will. Yeah,
he should. I think Will's recommendation for him was like, become a highly paid coordinator somewhere, because you can just work on the system stuff and let the head coach take the heat for the wins and the losses and for the roster construction, but just put your system in place. It's like I said, fascinating piece, and the kind of stuff you can get on Basket Under Review now that Will is writing for the site. He does all kinds of creative stuff alongside a lot of the other guys writing for the site, Brian Ralph, Kevin Sweeney, and the whole list. I'm not going to name everybody, but they're fantastic. Site has been great. So another plug for that. CJ, I think that's going to do it. I think we just about covered the Big 12. I don't think we left anybody out. Like I said, we've talked about Iowa State fans and Houston fans. If you really want to hear me say your teams, I think your team's going to be good again, check out previous shows, because we did that already. But yeah, I think that's going to wrap it up for us. CJ, you mentioned a couple places you're going. You got your Big 12 preview in the can already. Good for you. You've always been a diligent pre-writer with your features and stuff. What's immediately next for you in terms of off-season coverage?
I think I might start on the Big Ten today.
There you go.
I'm working on a story on an NBA concept that kind of took caught on last year that I could see maybe trickling down to college a little bit. I went to a coach's clinic at Alabama last week that really got my brain going and got some good ideas out of that. So
you still coaching yourself?
Not currently.
No, because you were coaching your kid for a while, right?
Yeah, I have in the past. Yeah,
putting a lot of fun sets into action. I remember you talking about that. That's good. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll keep an eye out for that. Thank you again for coming on the show. I look forward to seeing you out and about this season some, and maybe at the tournament, the Final Four. And thanks again to CJ Moore, our guest. Thank you to our producer, Corey Aldis. Thanks to Basket Under Review. Thanks to our sponsor, Homefield. We'll see you next week.